Hey, I'm Adriana Papaleo. I'm a hairstylist based in New York City and a session artist as well, and I want to welcome you to Fossa. It was a collaborative piece done with a painter whose name is Amy Cutler, whose work is absolutely incredible. This is really sort of a 3D representation of the world that she creates. She tells a lot of stories with hair. Hair for her represents femininity, it represents vanity, but it also represents the passage of time, the amount of time that hair would take to grow and the care that it would take to braid all of that. It feels like this secret, special society of women somewhere that there's something about them in their eyes and the things that they're working on. The first inspiration about Fossa came from the idea of an antique switchboard operator. The braids themselves are conduits of sound, so they go through the walls beyond the house into forever. So you would sit down here on this bundle and you want to put on the headphones. And on either side there's two separate compositions. Each one of these pairs of knobs is a volume and a pan for each track. So the concept is that you come in and you start to interact with the piece. This is the first time that Amy has ever done a collaboration. It is also the first time that Amy's work has ever been featured without figures. So when you come into the piece, you become the figures in Amy's work. The process of making the hair for Fossa was about an 8-month process. It consists of just under twice the height of the Empire State Building in hair, just over 800 feet of braids. The braids that are the big ones in the hive and on the bundles, those are synthetic. However, all of the smaller braids that are in the bundles that are hanging out here and all of the braids on the headphones, that's actually human hair. There was a definite life that the human hair had, which is kind of creepy, but that's the whole beautiful thing about hair. So the energy of the human hair we felt like was really important for things that people were going to be more tactile with. I knew that it couldn't just be an everyday braid. I had to figure out how to elongate it. So I started researching antique rope making and antique thread making techniques. I asked my girlfriend who was sitting on the couch just to hold an end of a hair, and I started spinning it and pulling it and spinning it and pulling it and spinning it and pulling it. And all of a sudden I had about 20 feet of hair, and I realized oh my God, here we go. I couldn't use a drop spindle because it had to be such a large scale of thread. So I became the spindle, and the wood and that little mechanism became the human, essentially. I'd work a full day and then I'd go until 3 in the morning at Amy's studio. Just, my hands would bleed from the hair getting caught, and she was like, oh my gosh, you're standing here, you are the women from my work. And it felt like I really identified with that, pulling up and down Amy's studio. Start in the kitchen, and then we'd go all the way to the bathroom. I'd wrap it around the bathroom doorknob. I'd come back, I'd wrap it around it again. We would have tons of hair wrapped all over the studio, around stools. I would braid it by honestly closing it in a window, and then going back through the studio, and then dropping it out the window. At one point we had 60 feet of a braid hanging out of a 10th floor studio in Brooklyn, which was pretty hilarious. I spent a lot of time being quiet, thinking about Amy's work, how she views her work, the women inside the work, spending time inside of what I thought their brains would sound like. The sound component, that is the ambient sound. So Emily sat down with a bunch of people individually and discussed the concept of burden, what it meant to them, how people deal with it. Then she took all of those conversations and extracted all the words. So the breaths that were left, she created the ambient piece with. Disembodied hair is something that is, it's very thought-provoking, it's very emotional, because you're like, ooh, where did that come from? Or maybe for me, I'm like, oh, I want to touch, it's beautiful. Hair encompasses so much life. It is definitely a medium that no matter what, people have a very strong response to. It's something in our culture that somewhere along the line became a bit more shallow seeming, or because it was surface level, it was trivialized. But to be honest, if you talk to anybody about their hair, it's a very important part of them. There's a lot of emotion that goes into it, even something as silly as a bad hair day. I think that the stories that happen inside is actually way more important than the stories we expect to tell.